Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. First things first, don't look at the hair's just doing her own thing today. It is the first week of Black History Month, so we are almost to a year that I began this channel, and that's super fun. And I will say this too, March is Women's History Month and February is Black History Month. So this is my first Black History Month on this channel. I don't know why I'm talking like this, but for our first story for Black History Month, we are going to talk about the first African-American woman to get a PhD and was an influential figure in racial segregation in schools, Inez Beverly Prosser. Let's get started. Inez Beverly Prosser was born on December 30th, 1897, 96, 95, or 94. I don't know. But most believe she was likely born in 1895. So that's what we're going with on this channel. She was born in San Marcos, Texas, and her parents were Samuel Andrew and Viola Hamilton Beverly. It is also said that she was born in Yoakum, Texas, but most believe that the family actually moved to Yoakum, Texas in 1900. Viola was a homemaker and Samuel was a waiter. Inez was the first daughter and the second child of 11 children. During her childhood in the late 1890s and early 1900s, Texas had very few to no educational opportunities that existed for African Americans. So this could explain why the family moved to Yoakum, Texas in 1900, where both Inez and her older brother Leon began school. Inez was said to have exceptional reading talent and a great passion for learning. By 1907, the family moved to Corpus Christi, but stayed for only a year because the town didn't have an all-black school. So Inez and Leon moved back to Yoakum and stayed with a family relative in order to attend Yoakum Colored School, where Inez would graduate in 1910 as valedictorian of her class. Her family, as you can guess, wasn't rolling in dough, but they planned on sending Leon to college because they believed that they could only afford to send one of their children to college. But Leon saw how passionate his sister Inez was about learning and was desperate to go to college. And to be honest, Leon wasn't interested in going to college, so he was able to convince their parents to support Inez going to college, so their money wouldn't be wasted. So, with her brothers and parents' support, Inez enrolled in college. Inez enrolled in Prairie View State Normal and Industrial College, which is modern-day Prairie View A&M University in Prairie View, Texas. It is a historically Black university that from its founding in 1876 is the second oldest public college in Texas. She received a degree in teaching and got a teacher training certificate, and was once again valedictorian of her graduating class of 1912. You are good. You are really hyper right now. When I get hyper, my eyes don't read correctly. Then in 1913, accepted a 2-year teaching position at an Austin Black elementary school, then as an assistant principal at Clayton Industrial School, before going on to accept a more long-term teaching position at the then all-Black Anderson High School, where she would stay till 1927. At Anderson, she would teach English and coach the girls' spelling team for competitions for the Interscholastic League, which was an organization that sponsored events for Black high school students in academic and athletic contests throughout Texas. While teaching at Anderson, she met Alan Rufus Prosser, who was an elevator operator at an Austin department store. Inez and Alan would marry in 1916. In 1921, Inez began to work towards getting her bachelor's at Samuel Houston College, which is modern-day Houston Tillotson University and is a historically private Black university. She would go on to get her Bachelor's of Arts degree with a minor in English and psychology in 1926, also graduating with distinction, meaning she graduated with a 3.750 or higher GPA. So she very smart. While at Houston College, she was given several awards, wanted to continue her education, and wanted to get a graduate degree. But with the amount of segregated schools in Texas, this was going to be impossible. But not one to be determined, Inez went out of state to attend the University of Colorado. And remember, I live in Colorado. But now, this is where I get upset. For those of you who are not from Colorado, there are technically 4 universities of Colorado's: Anschutz Medical, Colorado Springs, Denver, and the University of Colorado that you might know off the top of your head, Boulder. Go Buffs, Sanders is the bestest. So due to that, Inez either went to the original CU Denver or to Boulder, because at the time, both CU Boulder and CU Denver existed. I'm leaning more towards Boulder because that just makes the most sense. I can't be 100% sure of that because every reference just said University of Colorado. So I'm going to assume it's modern day University of Colorado Boulder is where Inez went. But if any of you out there know 100% where she went, please let me know in the comments. Anyway, she went here. During Inez's time at CU, she worked and took 4 undergraduate courses to make up for what Colorado thought she lacked from her time at Samuel College. She took 2 English courses, an abnormal psychology, and a physical education class. She also took several courses that were specific to her master's thesis that focused in areas of mental tests, measurements and tests, and research methods. She graduated from the University of Colorado, I'm assuming Boulder, in 1927 with a master's degree in educational psychology. Her thesis examined 4 kinds of English grammar tests that she created herself: completion, matching questions, true false, and multiple choice. Out of all of those, we all know which one is the worst. It's multiple choice. She gave these tests to 303 Anderson High students, and the conclusion of her analysis showed that her tests were beneficial in assessing English grammar, and she suggested different types of tests could measure different skills. The thesis was called The Comparative Reliability of Objective Tests in English Grammar. Though unpublished and didn't change the course of grammar assessment, it did motivate Inez to go further in her education and ignited her interest in psychology. After graduating, she went back to Austin and left Anderson High School to accept a position as a faculty member at an all-black college in Austin called Tillotson College. Tillotson College is the new name of Samuel Houston College. Now, Tillotson was a co-educational college, but a year before Inez accepted the faculty position in 1926, the school had become an all-women's college. While at Tillotson, I still can't get Titson out of my head. Inez showed not only her teaching and leadership skills, but her deep dedication to the educational and psychological development of Black students. From 1929 to 1930, she was able to give a series of lectures in education and psychology on top of her administrative duties. One of her lectures was even featured by George Washington Carver, who was a professor at Tuskegee Institute and would go on to develop techniques to improve the types of soils that were depleted by repeating planting of cotton. Look him up. He's fascinating. And I didn't know that soil was complicated. Well, I knew soil was complicated, but I didn't know it was that complicated. All combined, Inez was at Tillotson College from 1921 to 1930, was a student, teacher, and faculty member. She served as Dean Registrar and Professor of Education. And aside from this, she was essentially second in command in terms of administrative authority at Tillotson. In 1931, she was transferred to another dual administrative and teaching position in Tougaloo, Mississippi at Tougaloo College. On top of being now the Dean and Registrar of Tougaloo College, she was also the principal at Tougaloo High School. Because of course she was. When I say this chick loved teaching, she loved teaching. Inez's career took a massive boost when in 1931 she applied for aid from the General Education Board. This was a private organization that was established in 1902 by John D. Rockefeller and gives financial aid and supported higher education and medical schools in the U.S. and helped rural white and black schools in the South. In Inez's application, she said, quote, "I am interested in that type of research which will lead to better teaching in elementary and high schools," end quote. She would go on to win the aid and received $1,000, equivalent to $20,880 in 2024, and applied the aid towards another year of graduate studies. She left Tougaloo College and went to Cincinnati, Ohio to attend the University of Cincinnati in the academic year of 1931 to 1932 and enrolled in the Doctor of Philosophy residency program in the university's College of Education. She began her dissertation in November of 1931 called Non-Academic Development of Negro Children in Mixed and Segregated Schools. The project was designed to be a companion to a 1931 dissertation by Mary Crowley called A Comparison of the Academic Achievement of Cincinnati Negroes in Segregated and Mixed Schools. I don't know why these need to be an encyclopedia long titles, where she compared the academic achievements of African American students between segregated and integrated schools. At this time, Mary was the assistant superintendent of schools for Hamilton County, Ohio. She helped Inez get permission to various schools to do her research. Now, though Mary and Inez asked the same question about the differences between segregated and integrated schools, Inez focused on non-academic variables. See, Mary had found that there were no differences in students' school academic achievements between integrated and segregated schools. However, Inez found that in her small research group of 64 African American middle school students from the area, that half of the students did better in segregated schools than the other half enrolled in integrated or mixed schools. She argued in her dissertation that racial injustices and the feelings of isolation had a damaging effect on Black children's psyche, and the effects are more detrimental with the living standards because it applies to socioeconomic status. And this made the students more eager to leave school early, or in today's terms, drop out. She concluded that most Black students received a more balanced curriculum, support, affection, and family school consistency in segregated schools, and that segregated schools provided not only job opportunities, but also a nurturing environment for not only the Black students, but also the Black teachers. Whereas Black students that went to mixed schools were found to struggle with social maladjustment, experienced more dissatisfaction with teachers and family connections. They would be more introverted and would feel inferior. Quick side note here, the school that I went to, which was one of the top high schools in the state, when I say it was me and like two other Black kids, I mean it was me and like two other Black kids. And I couldn't help but feel a little bit inferior because when you're the only Black rock in snow, you feel a little bit out of place. She further concluded that different personality types did better in mixed or integrated schools. The significance of her research's conclusion was that race and racism played a role in the development of a personality. She acknowledged in her dissertation that some of her conclusions were based on not major statistical results, but justified them nonetheless. Inez returned to Tougaloo College during the academic year of 1933 to 1934, and during this time, she completed her dissertation, and it was approved by her committee in June of 1933. And with this, Inez found herself among the first group of both African Americans and African American women whose doctoral dissertations earned them a doctoral degree in psychology, making Inez one of the first African American women to receive a PhD in psychology. Boom. When she got her PhD, her massive accomplishment was on the front page of the Crisis magazine in August of 1933. This was the official magazine of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Like, look at her in her little cap and gown among the crisis. When I first saw that, I thought it was like a crisis, like, oh God, oh no, a black woman is smart. But then I realized it was a magazine. Between 1933 and 1934, Inez published a series of 7 articles in the Mississippi Educational Journal, which was the official journal of the Mississippi Association of Teachers in Colored Schools. And in these articles, she talked about many topics such as grammar, composition, English literature, and more overall subjects that would help improve the teaching of English in colored schools. During her lifetime, Inez supported segregated schools. Again, citing her dissertation, she pointed out the reason that segregated schools were beneficial for students and staff, and that it was detrimental in integrated schools. Now, as we know, the desegregation of schools movement is a topic and a half. It got ugly. It got ugly. Now, the massive desegregation of schools wouldn't happen till the late 1960s and early 1970s. However, despite the important roles and efforts of Black leaders like Booker T. Washington and philanthropists like Julius Rosenwald in establishing Black schools as esteemed institutions in Black communities, Black or Negro schools were criminally underfunded and ill-equipped, especially compared to the white schools. For example, remember the General Education Board that prided themselves on giving aid to rural, primarily Black schools in the South? Well, between 1902 and 1918, they gave $2.4 million, which is equivalent to $48.7 million today, to Black schools. Compare that to $25 million or $507.8 million in today's money to white schools. So much fun. Though the desegregation of schools was a highly debated topic, the Association of Afro-American Educators continued to support segregated schools for decades. And like Inez, they agreed that if resources are properly distributed, aka equal, the benefits of segregated schools were huge to a Black child's psyche and should be continued. Plus, during the 1920s debates about school segregation, many of Inez's arguments were cited. Inez was also a critical voice for the African American community when it came to women's academics, because it was little to non-existent. And her contributions to the improvement of education for students from all walks of life is felt and seen through many policies that are still used throughout the teaching community today. I want to quickly mention how awesome of a big sister she is. She paid for many of her siblings' higher education, which would help a total of 6 of her siblings go on to college and get college degrees. She clearly wanted the best for her siblings and guided them by giving money, books, and helping them on choosing courses to take, and was said to be supportive but not controlling. Another awesome thing, all 10 of Inez's siblings graduated from high school. We love hearing that. By 1934, Inez was on top of the world. She was improving training for teachers that worked in Mississippi Black schools and planned a summer program for teachers at Jackson College and often guided workshops and programs for teaching. But after finishing the summer school program in Jackson on August 28, 1934, Inez, her husband, and her sister, Catherine Beverly, were driving back to Mississippi after a family visit in Texas when they were involved in a head-on car crash near Shreveport, Louisiana. Inez was thrown through the windshield, and out of the 3 of them, Inez was the most seriously injured. She was taken to Tri-State Sanitarium in Shreveport to treat her injuries, but unfortunately, they were too severe. Inez Beverly Prosser died on September 5th, 1934 at the Tri-State Sanitarium from her injuries. She was only 38 or 39, only a year after earning her PhD. She is buried at the Southern Memorial Park Cemetery in San Antonio, Texas, and the inscription on her tombstone says perfectly in 6 words what was lost due to her early tragic death. Quote, "How many hopes lie buried here." The other big legacy her research gave to the country, it was used in debates leading up to the landmark decision in the Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka in 1954. Now, what is this case? Very basically, the Brown v. Board of Education was a landmark U.S. Supreme Court ruling which ruled that U.S. state laws establishing racial segregation in public schools were unconstitutional. This ruling was a cornerstone of the civil rights movement and helped establish the precedent that separate but equal education and other services were not equal, like at all. Now, what is separate but equal education? Well, to explain this, we have to go to another separate Supreme Court ruling in 1896 called Plessy v. Ferguson. This case began when in 1892, Homer Plessy, a mixed-race man, I guess you can say he's the Rosa Parks of trains, deliberately boarded a whites-only train car in New Orleans. Now, by boarding the car, Homer violated Louisiana's Separate Car Act of 1890, which required equal but separate railroad accommodations for white and non-white passengers. Ooh, the legal jargon is so good. Homer was charged. I don't know with what. I didn't look up what it was. If you do, let me know in the comments. I was too freaking mad to look that up. And his trial lawyers argued that Judge John Howard Ferguson should dismiss the charges on the grounds that the act was unconstitutional. And in today's world, we know it is. Judge Ferguson denied this, and the Louisiana Supreme Court upheld his ruling on appeal. So Homer took it to the U.S. Supreme Court. On May 18, 1896, the court issued a 7-1 decision against Homer, ruling that the law didn't violate the 14th Amendment, stating that though the 14th Amendment established equal equality of whites and blacks, but it didn't and couldn't require the elimination of all distinctions based upon color. So you can have rights, but not all of them. This brings us to Brown v. Board. By the early 1950s, the NAACP was hard at work challenging segregation laws in public schools and was filing lawsuits on the behalf of plaintiffs in states like Virginia, Delaware, and South Carolina. In the case of this infamous case, the plaintiff named Oliver Brown filed a class action lawsuit against the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, after his daughter, Linda Brown, was denied entrance to all of Topeka's all-white elementary schools in 1951. In the suit, Brown claimed that schools for black children were not equal to white schools, and segregation violated the so-called Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, which says that no state can, quote, deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law, end quote. It, along with 4 other cases related to school segregation, first came to the Supreme Court in 1952, and the court combined all of the cases into a single case called Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka. Where Inez's research comes into play here is her work on the identity and educational development, and I'm mad that I forgot to write this stuff down. I was writing so much down that I forgot to write this part down. That essentially, again, desegregation of schools was bad for the black kids' psyche. Though her research was brought up in the debates leading up to the main trial, it was still a huge thing. But her arguments against desegregation of schools didn't help the Topeka Board of Education, because on May 17th, 1952, the Supreme Court, in a unanimous 9-0 ruling in favor of the Brown family and the other plaintiffs. Though Inez's argument didn't keep schools segregated, it did help massively in the bricks of the road leading to the modern-day fight for equality in education for African American kids, and to create a more inclusive and effective educational system, one that I myself have benefited from. There you go. Now you know who you can thank that helped put on the equal playing field for equal education, whether you're white or black. And like I said, I went to a school where I was one of 3 black kids. So I can totally see how her research in the mental psyche of a black kid to stay in an all-black school, I totally see it. I totally buy it. It's still good that the desegregation of schools happened, but I also get the side of it's actually beneficial to be in an all-black school versus in an interracial school. Because trust me, even though I got a top-notch education by going to this very highly, mostly whitely funded school, I did feel inferior because I was one of 3 black kids in a school of what? I think it was 5,000. Yeah. Anyway, if you learned something today, and I sure hope you did, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And while you're down there, please leave a friendly comment. I'll be back next week with another video. But until then, don't be well behaved. You just might make herstory. See you next time, guys.